Welcome to What Happens Next, the channel dedicated to exploring the next chapter of our life when we hit our 50s and 60s and start to think about how we might want to change from that, working career to the next chapter. I'm really grateful today. I'm really, really grateful today because we've just gone over this year 400,000 views on our YouTube channel. And that's down to people like you watching our stuff. So thank you so much. And as a gift to you, I'd love to give you something back. We are currently in the process of getting the What Happens Next book edited. And we'd love for you to be one of the first people to get that book. We've got a waiting list on the What Happens Next website. And what Russ has told me he's going to do is put a QR code somewhere on this page so that if you've got your phone and you're watching it on a big screen, all you need to do is take a photo of that QR code. It will take you to the page where you can sign up for the waiting list and you can be one of the first people to get access to the What Happens Next book when it comes out. Also, there'll be a link in the comments on YouTube below, so feel free to click that as well, because what we want to do is help more people navigate the next stage of their lives in a way that improves their well-being as much as possible. And interestingly, for a lot of people, that also involves a lot more travel. And for many people, that also involves living internationally, actually relocating. So I'm really pleased to introduce Federica, who's come on today to talk about her experience of working with the clients who are going through that journey. Federica, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. And also congratulations for all this amazing success. I'm definitely going to be one of the first ones to get the book.
I know. It's so interesting because this year, and I don't know what's happened, Federica, but this year with the YouTube channel has become popular. What I care about is just adding as much value as we can. And this is why I'm really excited about this conversation today, because I think your insights are going to be super useful. Now, before we started, you were telling me about your travel. So tell us a little bit about the Philippines and what made you go there.
Yeah, we were just chatting about a vacation. We were not speaking about relocation, perhaps unfortunately. Just back from a couple of weeks in the Philippines with my husband. We were diving there in very beautiful places. We saw some wrecks, a lot of history. So it's good to be back, energized for December and also next year.
Love that. And I'm always curious about diving because underwater, is there a sense of peace? Like when you're diving, what do you feel?
It's beautiful. Definitely there's the peace from silence. I've read in news recently that they would put some sort of microphones where it's possible to speak underwater. And when reading it, I was like, I hate it. I mean, obviously for safety or tech divers, I get it, but I hope it's not for recreational because the silence is actually really nice. And then you have this sense of floating, right? It's like being without gravity. You're like which is quite nice. Nice to try once in a lifetime at least.
Yeah. It's definitely on the list. It's definitely on the list. So I know all about you, but for the purposes of our audience, tell us a bit about you.
Of course, thank you. So my name is Federica Grazzi. I am the founder of Mythos Relocation Solutions, which, as Chris was saying, is a consulting fully specialized in retirement abroad. We'll speak a lot about it afterwards. I am Italian, based in London. I've been living here in the UK for over 7 years. And my background is really in the intersection between cross-border tax and personal finance. I've spent many years in JP Morgan, first in the private bank doing actually advisory to ultra high net worth, and then in the investment bank doing government advisory. So that was really quite useful to understand more the institutional and policy side of international taxation and relocation. But I'm clearly also myself an expat. Besides the UK, I've lived in other 7 countries internationally, and I have naturalized property internationally. So it's good also, I guess, to give that personal side of the story and understand also the emotional implications besides just bureaucracy, right? So that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
So when you were relocating, what surprised you the most?
Well, in my personal experience, I would say the lack of good advice. I moved, for example, when I moved here in the UK, obviously I was with JP Morgan, right? So they did help me with some advisors, you know, in terms of especially the tax-related changes, the shifts in my investment portfolio. So I had someone, I'm not going to name any company, but, you know, quite big names, famous names. And I find quite incredible that I had to actually learn by myself about all the incentives that I had access to, you know, ISAs, all these kind of things. I had to just learn by blogs. And it was not even provided by one of the very big names. There was no really unified way of finding that advice. And there's a lot of experience by doing, by word of mouth, by reading blogs. But obviously that's not fully optimized. And there's definitely opportunity, I think, to disrupt the industry, not just for retirees, but for everyone.
Yeah, but it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I suppose when you're shifting between different countries with an employer, typically they'll get access to their network to provide you with the support you need. But if you're leaving your employer to relocate abroad, that's not always the case, right?
That's probably even harder, I guess. Yes, exactly. If you're on your own, absolutely.
So tell me about the business. When did it start? How's it going? And what do you think the most challenging thing you've done in the business has been so far?
That's an interesting question. Well, so the business was born in 2024. It has been growing quite quickly, probably because there's not really any other advisor that does this. There are clearly some relocation specialists. Often they are country focused, and very often they work, what we were saying, they work with corporates. So there's not really any other retirement relocation specialists globally, which made the growth quite exciting and quite fast, I would say. We started with one country, which is Greece. My husband in Greece is Greek, sorry, but besides this, let's say, personal link, when I was studying different options of countries, it really came across as the best option for me. And it's actually quite interesting just because this week, International Living published their 2026 best retirement countries globally, and Greece was #1 for the first year. So it's nice to recognize this insight. And as of today, we are now active in 3 countries, so including Greece, of course, as we said, but also Italy and Cyprus. And the goal will be to keep on expanding to all the, I don't want to say globally to every country, but to all the countries that are interesting.
What else was in the top 10? So if Greece was #1, what else was in the top 10?
So within Europe, we have, I think, Italy, we have Spain, we have Portugal, so the classic ones. But then there are also some other destinations in other countries. LATAM is quite interesting. So there's Panama, there's Costa Rica, there is Mexico, and then some in Asia. I think Thailand is quite popular for this. Not the Philippines, I did check, but it's not yet in the top 10.
Love that.
And if I can just say, like, I guess there's a lot of, because you asked me what was the hardest part, and I mean, I don't know what is the hardest, but I think one of the difficult ones was to categorize the services, just because there's nothing really like that. So in terms of countries, there's a lot of, you know, material in terms of where there is interest, obviously where there are tax incentives, where there are visa routes, but in terms of how to really help and tailor the service, I think that was beautiful, really crafted by speaking with a lot of people, but also quite hard because it's actually creating a new industry, if you want.
It's such an interesting thing, this, because we're doing the same at the moment for launching the What Happens Next service next year. And when you're, you know, when I started the financial planning business, there are models that you can follow, because financial planning as a bespoke service has been around for a long time. So you look at these models and you refine those models to suit you, and you, as you say, you speak to a lot of people and learn. When you're doing something that's very niche and very new, you don't always get the opportunity to learn from those existing models. So how's that journey?
Totally. It's interesting, and sometimes actually there's the risk of looking into similar industries, but that you want to disrupt. So the hard thing is actually to review everything and ask yourself, like, is this good? Do I want to keep this? Is, for example, if 10 slightly comparable services do a certain type of pricing, you should ask yourself, is it actually what works best? It might be easier to just be similar, but if you want to really disrupt and create value in a niche, as you said, you need to ask yourself. Not everything will be different, otherwise it might be quite confusing. But it's good to be always alert in terms of what works and what doesn't.
The bit that I'm curious about, Federica, is why this? Why when you could have done anything in the world in your business, why did you choose this?
It was a path in which I really tried to align what I know, what I care about, and what needed a new business in a way. And I really started, so the first two came a bit more easily in the sense, obviously I do have my professional background, which is similar, not exactly in the relocation space, but I do understand very well international finance optimization, international relocation. So that's something that I quite like, and I have done for many years now, professionally and personally. And then this was paired with doing something in the broader silver economy. It's a broad term, which ranges from something like what we do to healthcare. It's quite broad, but I've always liked working with the demographic of people after retirement. I've done a lot of volunteering. I'm a trustee on a nonprofit here in London. It's just something that I've always cared about. And that's kind of how it started in terms of doing a bit of business research. Obviously, I did come across the increasing trend of retirement relocation, and also tax optimization based on international relocation. And then just by virtue of looking into it, I've met also people that were interested, and I was trying to just help a little bit by doing research. And I came across the huge hole raised in terms of, or there was in terms of servicing these people. In the sense that what I found was, once again, there's not really anyone doing this, but also the professionals that are available, the service level that you find is not always constant. Really, many people didn't even show up for calls that we had booked. Clearly, there are some specific professionals in their field. You obviously find immigration lawyers, tax advisors. You're not going to be alone in the full process. But even here, it's really hard to find the right person. I've observed a lot of price inconsistency, not really explainable in any way. And these people can, even if they're excellent, but they can only help in their own niche, right? Whereas the retirement abroad goes a lot beyond just one or two, getting a visa or buying a house. It's a lot more complex. And this was really the intuition.
I always like, I mean, we do it in different sectors, but I always like to think part of our role is sort of as a concierge, right? It's a concierge service that connects people to the right people to help them with that that specific area, but also puts it all together. So actually, you might get an immigration or visa lawyer into the mix, but your job then is to go, right, we know we need that. Now that's done, we know we need the next step. And I think that's
100%. I don't pretend to know every legal or tax bit of every country. So obviously we do work with very well selected experts in every country. But as you say, then there's kind of that bringing it all together, making sure that nothing falls through the cracks. Think about also aspects that perhaps are not covered by specific advisor. For example, healthcare, which is obviously a massive, super important criteria and aspect that influences your quality of life if you move abroad. But there's not really anyone to go and ask for healthcare advisory. How does it work? I don't know. You need to figure it out. So that's centralized. And plus, there's the hand holding. There's the emotional aspect. That there's like, what if I'm concerned about X, Y, Z? And also here, it's not really easy to find that figure.
100%. I think people underestimate that transition, don't they? You know, they focus on, and we're finding it through the work we're doing with What Happens Next. People focus on the number, you know, the number of financial independence, and then turn around and go, I'm going through all these really complex emotions that are really difficult. So it's helping people understand a bit more about that. And I suppose there's some elements of relocation that you overestimate and some that you underestimate. What's the one thing most people underestimate the most?
I think an interesting one is finance. A lot of people look at the cost of living in different places, which is obviously a very important factor. But they do underestimate how much net income they will actually get before they start spending. And so one factor here is clearly taxes. There are some people that are really interested and driven by that, so they have better awareness. But all of those, or many of those that are a bit more lifestyle driven, they follow the dream, they follow the adventure. They're like, oh yeah, whatever, taxes. And actually, that will make a big difference, because even if taxes are relatively high in the UK, there are many places that actually have higher demand, right? On your gross income. So that's one. But once again, for example, even on the healthcare front that we were saying, even that one, depending on your age, in a place you could have to spend 2,000 a month in health insurance, and you didn't know about it. So it's like really having that budget approach that you do before moving there, to really understand even before you start spending and spending your money.
And that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because that assumption that even though lifestyle costs might be a bit cheaper, you add in healthcare and you add in tax, that can make a really fundamental impact in terms of what you get. What are some of the taxes that people like? Let's take your jurisdictions you work in the most, like Greece and Italy. What are the taxes that people should be aware of that typically aren't?
Well, the great thing is that both of these countries do have some tax incentives, meaning that if you move there and you become a tax resident, all your global income will be taxed in that country. And they have some special incentives for retirees. You need to be obviously receiving some sort of pension. And they allow them to only pay a flat tax. So both Greece and southern Italy, not everywhere, but the south in certain places, they allow to pay only 7% flat on everything you declare. In the UK, it starts making sense from an income of around £20,000. So the saving could be tens of thousands of pounds actually in taxes per year, and that's really good. So if these incentives offer a coverage on everything, obviously you have a bit more peace of mind. Otherwise, you need to also start thinking about taxation beyond income, which often is pension. So if you have investments, if you have dividends, if you want to sell your house, how all of these things might be treated. Something useful to keep in mind is that the incentives that are available in the UK are not always available abroad. So for example, if you have an ISA here, which is tax-free, and you sell it after you have moved, the country where you've moved, depending where it is, but it might actually claim taxes on it. Same for the 25% tax-free pension withdrawal. Many people are like, yeah, whatever, and then they move and they withdraw it, and then the UK doesn't tax it, but the other country does.
That's interesting.
So it's good to take a holistic approach once again before moving. A lot of the work we do here is before the move. Then there's the relocation. The relocation, it happens. It's fine.
How about Greece and Italy in terms of healthcare? What's the provision? Is there a gap in terms of what people get in the UK versus what they get in Greece and Italy? And is that typically covered with insurance? How does it work?
So something worth mentioning is that obviously for everyone who doesn't have European Union citizenship, then they would need a visa. And usually visas do require to have some sort of private healthcare coverage. just to make sure that you don't become effectively a burden on the country, anything had to happen. So the cost for this minimal, let's say, visa purpose insurance is actually usually very low, maybe around 300 euros per year. So it's very manageable. But then if you want to go beyond that,
level of care, right? That's
exactly. That's very basic. Now, the good thing here, specifically for British citizens, is that if you do perceive a public pension, then you're entitled actually to receive public healthcare in the European Union.
Yeah.
This is a benefit that was negotiated as part of the withdrawal agreement. Obviously, before, when we had the European Union also here, then healthcare was a lot more mobile. But this was one of the benefits that were negotiated. So the key criteria is to already perceive state pension, so not a private one, not a SIP. But then in that case, you can request effectively to transfer your healthcare abroad. It's going to be the NHS here in the UK paying for it. But the great thing is that then you have very good peace of mind that then effectively you're covered. But then if you want private healthcare, perhaps because, I mean, as you view it in the UK, right, because of speed of service, before of language barrier, obviously in different countries, because of whatever reason, then you would need to pay. And then clearly then the prices will depend a lot on your age. For example, in Greece, there is a 65-year-old is the big threshold after which the costs skyrocket. It gets a lot more expensive, mostly because a lot of insurances don't give out new policies. So those that do obviously can kind of do whatever they want.
There's a smaller market.
Exactly. So it's good to know in advance and perhaps time it, because maybe you start thinking about it 1 or 2 years before. Maybe you can start getting an insurance so that it's not a new insurance and you qualify for later. So there are some tricks.
That's a good tip.
There are some tricks.
I love that. Thank you. What's the one thing that people assume is going to be really complex, but is actually fairly simple?
Let's see. On this one, perhaps I would say the visa. In the sense that the visa is usually, I mean, there's this misconception of, because of Brexit, I cannot retire abroad anymore, which it definitely made it harder, but it's by far not impossible.
Yeah.
The visa is quite important to understand eligibility before. It's pretty much black or white. I mean, there are a few options, so it's not, a 5-minute discussion. But once you know that you are eligible, usually countries do give you a visa, so it's not as dramatic. It's just about knowing how to do it and getting the documentation. If you don't qualify, then not even worth thinking about it, because there's no way around it. So many people are extremely stressed about it, but the reality is that it's just a little bit of documentation, and it's before moving, so that actually the risks are limited. A lot more things you find out later, like all the tax implications we were saying. Once you file a year later, you're like, I hadn't thought about it. So this becomes a lot harder.
I suppose the other interesting thing for me is that, because what we encourage on What Happens Next is that element of, if you're preparing for that shift in your life, actually taking a bit more time to do it.
Yeah.
What would you recommend people do if they were saying, well, actually, you know what, we're thinking about moving and living abroad? How long would you recommend people take before they start going and looking for homes and they want to understand all the implications? What's the run of the road you'd recommend people take before they move?
Totally. Now, Chris, it's a very good question, because now we are mostly speaking actually about the relocation itself.
Yeah.
But there's all that phase about deciding if, where, and when, and how to move. And that's something, in terms of services, that's something that we have expanded a lot into because of the demand, right? When we started, it was like, I help you move. But the reality is many people are like, I'm retiring in 5 years, but can you help me think about, should I go to Portugal? Should I go to Spain? Is it? It's definitely worth starting earlier. I would say, a few years before, like perhaps 3-4 years before, it can be useful to start thinking about a framework of what matters to you. There are so many indicators, like, do you really care about becoming the citizen? Do you really care about connecting with the locals, then learning the language? Or do you want to go to a place that is better, a bit more English speaking? Or are tax incentives very relevant for you? Do you want to maximize your inheritance? And it's a lot of factors, and it's not one size fits all.
Sure.
So that kind of, even before going into the country itself, country specific, let's say, understanding is good starting to think about your blueprint. And then once you have that, obviously some countries would come up. And then, as you said, it's good to really go and visit. I always recommend to go and spend some time, ideally off season, ideally not in the main, touristic square, but kind of test your life. We can, we can plan some real estate viewings just to get a sense of how infrastructure works. You can rent a car and drive around. Maybe you can even just go to a pharmacy just to see how it feels to go, go to the supermarket, cook your stuff.
Well,
So that's really early
it's
steps.
something we talk about quite a lot on what happens next, because often people jump in with both feet, and I'm a real advocate both in any journey towards the next chapter of your life in incremental low cost experiments. So how can you try things out to see whether they fit? And actually you might turn around and go, and it's an interesting one, is Federica, because you turn around and go, well, I don't want a 2-week holiday because that's not going to tell me whether it's going to fit. But going for a month and seeing whether that feels differently compared to the short holiday, and maybe renting a accommodation which is more similar to the way you'd live, so you can see how that feels as well. There's loads of these low cost experiments you could do.
Absolutely.
Close to without making that big commitment.
Yeah, we were just actually speaking about it with a British client. She's early retired. She's not even 60. Moving to Cyprus. And at the beginning, she was like, I'm selling everything. I'm going to buy a house straight away. I know what I want. I've been to Cyprus. I'm going again for a month. So I'm going to see it. And then just by, the virtue of understanding how it works, the uncertainty, and like there are some shade that you need to test out. So the first step that we discussed was like, okay, let's rent for 1 year before you buy, so that you have time, you understand, you see the market. It's not, the turnover of houses is not as high as might be central London, right? So just get your time. And then she proactively told me, perhaps I don't sell yet. Given I'm not buying, perhaps I don't sell it. It's just, having a small contingency planning, I think is quite worth it for practical reasons, but also just for mindset, or, having, once again, that safety of like, whatever. Worst case, I've done a year. Yeah, I've had to deal with a little bit of bureaucracy for the first year, but it's not the end of the world. I can come back and it's gradual.
I think after a year's worth of experiments, you'll really know whether you want to do it or not, and you can make some definitive choices. But it's having that realistic element of turning around and going, well, this is what it's really like, as opposed to, Federica, I do it all the time. I go to a lovely, beautiful place and fly out somewhere. I go, wouldn't it be great to live here? And I always come back with that reality of it's different when you live somewhere versus going on holiday, isn't it? That's the reality.
Totally. We actually had this conversation in the Philippines just because it was so nice. People are super nice, the service, and it was so warm. And then what happened is that they canceled us a domestic flight. And, here you would have compensation and they arrange your things. And there was like, well, whatever, there are no more flights, kind of good luck. And we were thinking, okay, sometimes it's nice to have, the institutional thing of like, okay, I'm taken care of if something happens. But it's good.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? That, like, if you do that for a year, you understand the pros and cons, and it might mean I'm actually fine with whatever that implication means, and I'm going to make the jump. But then you've got a deeper understanding of what that looks like in reality.
Exactly. You need to test your limits. If you move abroad, there will have to be some element of flexibility. You cannot just expect to take your life and move it. You need to have fun with it. But then 100%. There are some limits that you need to be aware about and test them. So that's really good. Absolutely.
I love that. I know that on the course that you run for people just start to think about this international relocation, you talk about aligning your vision with the practical reality. What does that actually mean?
It's effectively quite close to what we were discussing. You know, I have an idea of how I want to live. So, for example, a lot of people that want to retire abroad, they are well traveled, so they're not actually wanting to go abroad just to stay with a bunch of Brits. A lot of people tell me, I want to live with the locals. I want to, I want to be local. Get me out of the touristic hotspots. And I'm like, perfect. That's great. But this means, are you willing to learn the language? Are you willing to adjust to the fact that shops will not be open at the times you perhaps are used to? You want to drive, okay, but you understand that the roads will be slightly different, not always as maintained. Google Maps usually works, but question mark. A client yesterday was telling me, I'm so used to having Amazon bringing me everything next day. How will I do it? And this kind of this, there's this like idyllic, I wanna live with local. I wanna have a lot of hobbies and do volunteering, but that actually, do you understand how that works in practice? And that's actually why it's so important to understand your own areas of flexibility versus red lines, and test them out. Is exactly what we were saying. Absolutely.
So interesting, because I think that element of flexibility is fundamental, isn't it? You know, you're not gonna have that. You're not going to be able to. I'd imagine there are parts of Italy and Spain and Portugal and Greece where you could expat communities where you could literally just move your life and
translate.
But actually, there's still going to be the bureaucratic element that you're going to have to get used to in terms of some of those elements. But when you're thinking about, if you've got a short list of countries you're thinking about going to, and I know you talk about this on your course. What are the key factors? Let's say you're thinking about, I know, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and Greece as the ones that you think you're going to move to. What key factors should you consider when you're comparing those countries?
That's a good question. So what I observe is that often people start with the lifestyle filter of like, I want to be at the beach, I want to be, close by, like, having flights that are convenient. And then this has a first narrowing down. And then you kind of open up again by going a little bit into bureaucracy. So the very first and obvious one is, once again, are you eligible for immigration purposes to go there, to live there? Does it align with your needs? Before even going into everything else. And then I think taxation comes quite up on this list, because you need to effectively understand if you can live there, not just if you will feel comfortable about it effectively. Then there's what we were saying, element of healthcare. And then going a little bit beyond the obvious, people think about how many expats effectively there are, what we were saying. Usually it's nice when there's kind of a fine balance of like, I have opportunities to obviously live like a local, but equally there has been enough people coming so that actually people speak English and then, have a certain level of service if I need to, etc. There is an element of clearly, things that sound obvious, but for example, safety, and institutional quality, and political fragmentation. These are actually aspects that many people tell me that they're interested about.
But I'd imagine in a country like Italy, country like Greece, country like Portugal, Spain, there's certain areas that are more aligned to having an expat community, and there's certain areas that are a bit more rural that are not aligned for that. So when you're comparing communities, do you need to go a layer down, or would you just say, here's what that country is aligned to?
I think it's actually quite local. Take a country like Italy. It's a big country, and it actually really varies region by region. Like north of Italy by south of Italy is like two different universes. Unfortunately, the level of English is so. It's for some countries, I don't push clients to learn the language straight away. For Italy, I do encourage it a lot because it helps massively. culture is a bit different. The days work a bit differently. There's a lot more community, which is, people think about it in a way that is nice, but equally this also means that people mind a lot more about your business that you might be used to. So it's kind of having this analysis, often kind of having discussions about it, thinking about some insights that perhaps you hadn't considered, aspects, for example, even like transportation. If you do you want to buy a car or not? Because if you want to go to Sicily, you will not be able to just rely on public transportation. Maybe you just think about, obviously you've traveled in northern Italy and you've taken a high-speed train between Milan and Florence in a couple of hours, and you're like, Italy, yeah, I'll be fine with a train. But then I want to go to Sicily because there's better weather and there's tax incentives. And I'm like, okay, let's break it down.
You're not train in Sicily.
Exactly. It's a lot of this kind of conversations, thinking about specific locations based on the needs, and then try and test it. Yeah, go on a holiday, even if it's again ideally a month, but even if it's 2 weeks, you get a sense, right?
What fascinates me is the cultural differences. So you've traveled to a lot of places, you've lived in a lot of places. What was the big cultural difference that surprised you the most about Italy and the UK? And what, as you say, you do a lot of work with Greece. What's the thing people need to be aware of culturally in terms of difference that probably isn't as obvious as they once thought?
One element is the sense of family, community, of the small talk. Actually, for me as well, like I also do a lot of business with these countries, but by now I'm pretty Anglo-Saxon in terms of efficiency. I have my business call. I'm like, we need to do X, Y, Z. I kind of have another call later. People are like, well, I need to tell you about I'm like, oh my God.
You know what? It reminds me of a story. So my friend, a couple of years ago, relocated to Italy. So he relocated to a place called Desenzano on Lake Garda.
Desenzano, yeah, of course.
Yeah, beautiful place. And we were over on a holiday, and he said, look, come to the place. And what was interesting is the pace compared to London and the South East. And there are places in the UK that are far more sort of relaxed, but the pace in Desenzano was very relaxed. We had a 5-hour dinner, a lot of really nice wine. The kids played we could see the kids because they were in the courtyard below.
Yeah, of course. It's beautiful.
It's interesting because, again, we were in a holiday mode, and he said to me, what's weird is when he's in work mode, sometimes that doesn't work because everybody's really relaxed and he wants to get stuff done. So I suppose pace of life is an interesting one, isn't it?
And you need to think about it from like everything, because some people are like, perfect, I'm retired, I also want to slow down pace. But then, okay, you're buying a house, you need works to be done. Okay, we get done, but just like, and I mean, I don't want to just speak about it negatively. There are many things that I think are really wonderful. You know, how, once again, families are very connected, communities are very connected. But this might mean that it takes a little bit time of, to get access to that. You need to learn the language, compared to another culture, as it might be the British culture, which is already very international and open-minded and perhaps more used to welcoming people. But then on the other side, perhaps with less of this, very close-knit communities and families that you see. So it's not just bad things. It's really about the translation sometimes.
Look, I mean, you could argue. I think you could really argue that there's a great book that we talk about on What Happens Next all the time, called The Good Life, by a guy called Robert Waldinger, and he runs the Harvard study of happiness, effectively, and it's an 80-year study. It's followed people for 80 years, man and boy, girl and woman, all the way through, and then follows their kids and their grandkids to look at what really improves well-being across a lifetime. And the interesting thing is, it is complex and it's multifaceted, but he boils it down to one thing. And the book is, if you're watching this, my recommendation is if you're preparing for your What Happens Next, this book's definitely worth picking up. He boils it down to the quality of our lives are determined ultimately, complex, but ultimately by the quality of our relationships. And you wonder whether this desire to just be productive, just get stuff done, actually takes us away from what actually improves our well-being, and whether other countries with their focus on community and family have sort of got it right. What do you think?
It could be good to find a balance sometimes.
It's always balance, isn't it? It's always balance.
But yeah, definitely, I do think that this being able to rely on your community is definitely an important part of Southern cultures. And I mean, as you said, reflected in some of the older populations globally, right? They say good food, healthy food, activity, because they're like hilly towns where people need to kind of go up and down, be with your people at the bar every day, gossip on the road. That's a lot part of it. I fully agree.
Yeah, like Sardinia and Okinawa in Japan, and
totally.
the Blue Zones research is
the Blue
really
Zones.
That sort of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely,
really
absolutely.
Good. So we've talked a lot about the practical realities we should consider when we're thinking about relocating. What others do we need to factor in when we're thinking about the next step?
As you said, we spoke a lot about the practical. There's an emotional element, right? Which is, I think, by virtue of being prepared and knowing what to expect, because you have done your homework, because you have been, a lot of this potential fear is actually already addressed. But that said, you're shifting your life. For many people, it's the first time they move abroad. There will be an adjustment period. And I think that's totally normal. So it's good to kind of have it already in mind that the first year might be a bit of a transition, a bit more fun, learning your ways, learning a bit of the language, getting your community. It's very demanding. I think it's very beautiful. Actually, many people have told me that they think that that their health and mental health as well have improved by living abroad because of all these kind of new opportunities, new challenging and new challenges. So it's beautiful in a way, but also it could be a bit demanding. So I think it's good to be aware about it before, and not just like, after a month say, oh my gosh, I missed my Tesco in front of home, I need to go back. It's just like, it's a shift. Having some people to rely on, having a contingency plan, being prepared, this help. But it's good to factor in.
I think that's a really interesting point, and it's a conversation I have with clients all the time. Even positive change results in some really challenging emotions. I've had clients who have achieved financial independence, sold their business, finished their career, and know that they want more freedom of time and therefore left work, and found it challenging. Even though that in the medium to long term, that might be the right move, because I think change is hard, right?
Totally. But that's why preparation helps. I'm sure you have already hosted many retirement planners that do all the work right before people leave the job. It's like, how do you envision yourself? Can you start some activities? And that's always a path.
Well, it's the idea of what happens next. It's building
absolutely
of people who are helping.
Absolutely.
Funny enough, the conversation I had just before this in the office was with a lady who has just bought a property in Cyprus.
Okay.
And so it's really pertinent. I asked this. And I said, okay, well, what made you buy it? And actually, she's Cypriot. So she goes for quite a lot every year, and she's done that experiment. I always think about that, not only the financial cost, but that 2 feet in sort of approach, and go, is it worth doing a bit of an experiment before you move that gives you more flexibility, but then allows you to make the right move eventually? What factors should you be thinking about when you decide whether to just jump straight in with 2 feet or take an experiment?
Yeah, I think the two key dimensions here are A, how much money out of your total money you're spending, and B, why you're doing it. So maybe starting from the second one, obviously a lot of people buy just because perhaps they're used to owning property, because they want that confidence of like, I can do whatever I want. They want to feel they have settled in. And in that case, I reckon there's no rush. It's actually better to smooth in, perhaps as you were saying, rent for a year, rent for a year or two, try 2-3 different locations, and then make the investment. You're going to get there. It's fine. Some other people actually buy for other reasons, for investment, to qualify for visa. So for example, Greece and Cyprus as well, they do have some residency by real estate investment opportunities.
Oh, interesting.
So in that case, you're like, okay, I'm going to buy something, I'm going to get residency, it makes sense, and then I see whatever, I keep this one or I change. And this is actually connected to the second point, or like first point, as we said before, of how much of your full money it is. If you're like kind of locking in everything, then it's going to be very stressful to, if you have to sell. If you're like, okay, I want to qualify for a visa. In Greece, you can start from 250K. So if you're like, whatever, if you have $1 million and you spend 250K, still like obviously a good part of your money, but you're not, with extremely stressed that you cannot have a bit of flexibility if you're.
Well, I mean that balance between buying property but also ensuring that you can achieve your financial plan over the longer term with liquid capital, so you're not too reliant on the money you're buying the property with, is really a really important point. One thing that I didn't know about, and I'm really curious to explore, is that element of ownership in property and the impact it has on visas. So you mentioned that was it in Greece that happens? If you own a property, it's more likely you'll get a permanent visa. What other factors are factored into the visa process?
Well, I mean, there are specific visa paths built around this residency by investment. They're often called golden visas, although it's not the same in every country. And effectively, these are targeted not just to retirees, but to everyone who wants to make an investment in the country, and then obviously gain residency. So it's often with real estate, but it can also be with startup investments or just government bonds investment or like philanthropy initiatives. So there are a few different options. So it's a different approach from the standard retirement visa, which is usually just proving that you have sufficient passive income to live in, with thresholds that vary country by country, but that's usually kind of the approach. So this is a different one in which you're like, okay, I'm making a big upfront investment, but then I gain residency. And the good thing is actually in this way is usually a more permanent type of residency compared to the standard retirement visa that you need to renew every few years until you qualify for a permanent residency or citizenship.
So let me understand a bit more about that. If you wanted to do a temporary experiment and you wanted to go for a year, is that possible under a fairly easily accessible visa or not? Or what's the process for the experimental stage of that? Compared to the more permanent stage?
The easiest, obviously, experimental way is to go visa-free. So as British citizens, they can be, for example, in the European Union for 6 months a year, although the challenging thing is that they need to be split. So it's maximum 90 days under every 180 days. And this is for all of Schengen. But, already if you go and rent get an Airbnb for 3 months, that's kind of already giving you some hints. So that's kind of the easiest, because you're not shifting tax residency. You're not shifting, you don't need a visa. You can just live on a travel insurance rather than a local health insurance. So that's really.
And how long do you need to be out and then in again to renew that 3 month period? Is it a day?
It's days, and it's on a running basis. So you just need to look at your past 180 days and make sure that you haven't been in Schengen for 90 days. So once again, it's a bit painful, but you can do it and you can try. And it's a very good way for people that perhaps have, extended times off before their retirement, or they've just retired and they want to kind of give it a try. So that's option one, very easy. As soon as you live in the country more than 6 months a year, then you become a tax resident. And that triggers some changes, even if you're just testing. So it's useful to say, obviously, I'm trying, but I wouldn't start with that. I would start either with the travel and with that kind of analysis, like work that I do with clients that I was telling you about, of like, okay, let's understanding how everything will work. Let's make a budget. Let's explore areas, and then you're going. Because even if it's 1 year, obviously you can come back, but you will need a visa, and you will need to shift your tax residency. So meaning that you will be liable to pay taxes there. So it's temporary, but I would say it's a bit more temporary. Like, you can always come back, right? But I would say that's a bit more temporary in terms of perhaps I have already done the analysis of deciding which country I want to go to, but I'm not sure which area or that I want to stay forever. So what I do is I go for a country. I will still need to do a bit of bureaucracy, but it's okay. And I'm renting. So these are the tiers, I would say. The first one is really like, whatever, I'm just going on extended holiday effectively. And then the second one, it requires already a little bit of commitment.
There's an increasing commitment to each stage, isn't there? Absolutely. I know I might be digging in the weeds here, and this is only relevant to tax geeks like you and me. But that 6 month period, is that in a calendar year or in a tax year?
That's in a tax year.
Perfect.
Which for many countries is the same as the calendar year. Most countries, apart from the UK, but yeah, it's in a tax year.
Amazing, and that's only going to be probably relevant to you and me, and maybe one person listening. But I'm glad I asked it. Federica, tell me a little bit about one story of a client you've worked with that really illustrates the work you do.
Absolutely. Perhaps actually speak about two, just because they're a bit different. So one of them, he came to me with a plan that he had made of like, I want to go straight into execution. I want to move to Greece. I already know where. I've traveled there extensively. Like, he had thought about it extremely well already. And he was like, let's go deep into execution. And I said, sure. Okay, that's fine. And effectively, we started implementing, taking these appointments. And just by virtue of then learning more about some caveats that he didn't know about, then he decided to actually do what we were saying of like starting with the 90-day option, just not to move his full, life abroad. And that's actually something that happened quite at the beginning of the journey. And since then, I have incorporated more formally in the way that I deal with clients, that we need to start with that review on paper, that everything works. So that's not something that I accept skipping anymore.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I love working with the clients who are really well informed, because it means the conversation starts at a point where you go, this is really interesting. But you don't know what you don't know. Exactly. And actually, it's that element of, how about this? Oh, well, I didn't think about that. That means that you can add a lot of value. That's brilliant to hear.
Exactly. Even if someone is like, I have it, then we're like, okay, let's just do it in stages. I think it's safer for them, safer for me, and it's just how it should be. I had another client, a really wonderful man, who came to me saying that his dream with his late wife was to move to Greece. And now he was at the turning point in his life, really wondering about the meaning that he wanted to give to his next decade. And he did say, okay, I do it by myself. It was really moving. He was extremely determined, but having no idea of where to start. And we did everything together. So we started by finding the property, a little bit on ourselves. Obviously, he had already visited the country a few times, so he had ideas, but we did work with some local real estate agents, and we found his dream properties. We went through the process of buying with lawyers, with an engineer. So there was all that side Then we qualified him for visa. We qualified him for a 7% tax incentive. We are registering him now for healthcare in Greece. So it's actually a full 360 degrees survey. And for him, I mean, he told me very explicitly that he wouldn't have done it without a figure like me. He had already looked into it before, but it was like, I cannot do it by myself. It was just too big of a burden. And it was a very beautiful, I mean, it's still ongoing now, but just a very beautiful relationship, just because it was really reliant on trust and the understanding of, you know, I need to do this, and I know why I'm doing it, but I'm also giving you that responsibility, right? Of helping me to the other side. So it's really wonderful. A lot of, you know, when I started the company, some people were like, why don't you also work with digital nomads now? It's so booming. And I was like, I mean, there might be some overlaps, but the reality is it is a totally different way of working with clients. And I do love the relationship that I'm developing, because they're really very often based on this trust and on emotions, and not just, you know, the XYZ that you have to do.
Of course. And actually, I mean, my experience is the relationships you build. I was thinking about this the other day. I'm really grateful that I get to work with people I really like and want to help. And that you know, we've got younger clients, but typically you're supporting people at a really integral part of their lives, and that means work's really meaningful too. So yeah, Federica, I've loved that conversation.
Me too, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Where can people find out a little bit more about you?
Well, obviously now you have my name, so you can just put it in Google and you'll find a few things. We do have a website that has a lot of information about our history, about our services, about the countries we offer, and even a few more, just to, you know, share news and information. So that's Mythos Relocation. It's Mythos Relocation Solutions, the whole name, but I'm sure if you type it, you'll find it. Mythos is MITOS, which is just as a reference, the thread that in the Greek mythology was used to get a hero out of the labyrinth.
Is that where it comes from? I love that.
That's a bit of a story, and just because I started with Greece, and Cyprus, Crete is obviously a very big location, and I really love the story of getting people out of a labyrinth, right, out of the maze. So that's,
you know what? When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Greek mythology, and it's really interesting. My girl, I mean, Charlotte, my older daughter, just loves, you know, Medusa and the Minotaur and Zeus. You know, all of those stories are just incredible, aren't they? So I love that inspiration. Is it Mythos Relocation .co.uk.com?
.com, mythosrelocation.com. Yeah, that's the one.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to you.
Pleasure. And I hope as you're watching, you've got bucket loads of value out of today's conversation. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you on what happens next.